Today we're going to talk about interpreting our remainder and deciding what our remainder really means when we're dividing. So we're going to look at some word problems and decide what should we do with that remainder in certain types of word problems. So I'm going to go ahead and label the date. I'm going to put division, and I'm going to put interpreting. The remainder, and this is NBT 6, and this is going to be page 17 for me. Alright, so at the top I'm going to put division, interpreting, the remainder, okay. So interpreting here means deciding what I need to do. So this word right here means deciding what something is or what it represents, okay? And the remainder is the leftover portion in my division problem. Okay, so I'm going to be deciding what the leftover portion of my division problem really is, what it really means. Okay, so when I come down in my notes, I'm going to start with looking over the worksheets that I've given you to glue into your notebook, and we're just going to talk about those a little bit. So the first one that I gave you looks a little something like this. So sometimes you ignore the remainder, okay? It says the gift wrapping department of a store has a roll of ribbon 1,780 inches long. It takes 1 yard of ribbon, or 36 inches, to wrap each gift. How many gifts can be wrapped? So I would take 1,780 and divide it by 36, because that's how much wrapping paper it takes to do one gift. This is my total wrapping paper. So I would divide my total wrapping paper by how much it takes to do one gift, and that would tell me how many total gifts can be wrapped. Now, when I have a remainder left over, when I look at what's left over, I ignore the remainder because I can't wrap another gift fully with leftover wrapping paper. If it's not 36 inches, then part of my gift will be showing. So when do I ignore the remainder? I ignore the remainder whenever there is not enough left to complete the task or to complete the group. Okay? So we're going to write that into our notebooks. So the first situation, ignore the remainder when there is not enough to complete the task or group. Okay? That's when I typically ignore the remainder. Okay? Then we're going to look at the second situation. Sometimes you round up to the next whole number. There are 247 people traveling to the basketball tournament by bus this year. Each bus holds 52 people. How many buses will be needed? Why do you round up? Well, if there's 247 people total traveling, and you have one bus can fit 52 people. I'm trying to figure out how many buses I need. So I'm going to take 247 and divide it by 52. when I divide 247 by 52, if I have a remainder, that remainder really means people that won't fit on my buses. So I don't want to leave those people that won't fit on my buses. I would just want to get another bus. Okay, so why do I round up when I have a remainder? Why would I go up to take my quotient to the next whole number? Well, I would take my quotient to the next whole number because I don't have enough for for everybody that needs to be included, and I can't leave anything out. Okay, so the second situation we're going to write in our notebook is round your quotient to the next whole number. I do this when I will not have enough to include all of the necessary people or objects. A lot of times this is like buses, cars, stuff like that, etc. So this is stuff that you don't want to exclude anybody, and so you have to get another one even though it won't be completely filled. Okay. My third scenario here is sometimes you use the remainder to form a fraction. So the 28 students in Mrs. Colby's class will share 98 slices of pizza equally at the class picnic. How many slices will each student get? So when they did the problem for us over here, you have 98 slices of pizza and 28 students that are sharing them. If I do 28 into 98, 28 times 3 gave me 84. So I subtracted that, and I had 14 left over. So with 14 left over, that means more people can get more pizza. I just have to take those 14 slices and cut them into smaller pieces. Well, if I cut these 14 slices each in half, it gives each of those 14 slices really ends up making two slices for each one. And that gives me 28 more slices that are smaller. So that's how I got 3.5. 3 whole pieces. And then if I take the 14 that are left, I can split those in halves, and everybody can get an additional half of a piece. Okay? So sometimes you turn your remainder into a fraction. So let's add that to our notes. I turn my remainder into a fraction when I have something that can be split into smaller pieces. So a lot of times it deals with food. So cookies or pizza or pies or things that you can split up into smaller pieces. Now, there's certain things you wouldn't be able to split into smaller pieces that really wouldn't be effective. But things that you think about, oh, I could split this with you. You think about a lot of situations that have food involved there. Okay. Our next scenario is sometimes you use a decimal number instead of the remainder. So I'm going to try to get this up under the camera a little bit clearer so you guys can see. Sometimes you use a decimal number instead of the remainder. So suppose 16 friends earn $348 at a car wash, and they want to divide the money equally. To find out how much money each person will get, one of the friends divided as shown here, and each friend will get $21.75. So if I look over here, 348 divided by 16. All right, 16, when I multiplied the 16 times 2, I got 32, and I had 28 left over. Now, 16 won't go into 28. But since I'm dealing with money here, it really means that I had $2.80 right here. If I think about place value, because there's a little decimal, or excuse me, it really means that I had not $2.80, excuse me, I'm sorry, means that I had $28 left to split with 16 people. That meant I had to kind of break it down into a smaller amount per person. So what I can do up here is add a little decimal place, because that's what comes just before the ones is a decimal, and then you have the tenths and the hundredths place, or the pennies and the you have your, excuse me, I can't talk right today in this video. You have your dimes, and then you have your pennies right here. So I've got to think, how many $1 bills, dimes, and pennies could I give out to make that 28? So they turned that, they put their decimal here, and they kept dividing. 16 into 28 went one time, so they put a 1 right here and subtracted. And they had 12 left over, and they brought down their 0. So 16 into 120, that'll go 7 times. 7 times 16 is 112. I subtract, I get 8 left over, and I bring down that 0. And 16 into 80 will go 5 times, and I get 80 left over. So I get $21.75. So when do I turn it into a decimal number? Most times I turn it into a decimal number when I'm dealing with money. Okay, so in my notes I'm going to write, turn the remainder into a decimal when dealing with money. Or sometimes you can do decimals of measurements. You can break it down into a decimal portion of a measurement. Okay. You can do the same thing with fractions. You can have a fractional measurement there too. Okay. All right. And the final scenario, or the final situation, is, I've got to turn back to my page here. Final scenario is, sometimes the remainder is the answer to the problem. A bagel shop has 138 bagels to be packed into boxes of 12 to be sold. The extra bagels are for the workers. How many bagels will the workers get? Why is the remainder the answer? So it says they have 138 bagels to pack into 12 boxes. Or, excuse me, to pack into boxes of 12 to be sold. And if there's any extra bagels left, those are for the workers. My question asks, how much will the workers get? Well, the workers get the extra bagels. They get the remainder. Okay? So sometimes the remainder is the answer to the problem when my question asked to tell how much is left over. So the remainder is the answer whenever the question asks how much is left over. Okay. What I would like for you to do is try to solve numbers 6 and 7 at the, I'm going to have you guys, on your worksheet that you got to glue into your notebook, you can choose one of those scenarios to solve. So you could choose number 4 right here, number 5 right here. You could solve numbers 1 or 2 or number 3 right here. You could choose to rework out one of those in your notebook, and it tells you what to do with those remainders, and see if you can figure out how to do that specific task with your remainder. Okay, so you're going to choose either numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from your pages that you glued in. Try to solve the problem in your notebook and figure out how to do that specific task with your remainder. Okay, since this was such a long video, if you can tell me exactly how long this video was tomorrow, then I will give you a ticket.